Hi there all, so just a quick announcement. We've just made this video just to put all of the main factions into one video. Thank you all so much for the support so far. I just want to let everyone know that I have also finished the audio for the animation video that we plan on coming out soon. I say soon, it's probably going to be around 2, 3, 4 weeks, not entirely sure. It all depends on the animation process. But yeah, I hope you enjoy all these. We're currently in the process of finishing up the MISC videos, and then we'll move on to the heroes, so we'd love to know what you lot think of that. And another thing, I do plan on getting a new mic because this one's a bit it's not as good. So yeah, I think that's everything. I hope you enjoy the video.
In StarCraft 2, the drones are the first playable unit. Drones used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. Drones are the only unit for the Zerg that can build and gather materials. Drones differ from probes and SCVs of the Protoss and Terran in that they can only slowly regenerate health as opposed to the fast recharging shields of the probe or the repairable hit points of the SCV. Drones move by hovering above the ground using a float bladder that disrupts gravity around the drone, effectively making them swim through the air. Drones were originally called Gasher Wasps from the planet Eldersthene before becoming assimilated into the swarm. Overlords used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the Overlords are the second playable unit. Overlords provide control over other Zerg units. The more Overlords, the more Zerg. Unlike most other Zerg breeds, Overlords have a greater capacity to act on their own judgment, though their mental flexibility is still severely limited. Overlords use helium-filled gas sacs and a weak telekinetic psi ability for lift and motive power. Overlords were evolved from the Gargantis proximae, a species of giant spacefaring and semi-intelligent creatures which volunteered to be assimilated in order to avoid extinction. Zerglings used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the Zerglings are the third playable unit. Zerglings are the most numerous of the Zerg mutations, forming the bulk of the Zerg swarm. Zerglings in the heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Raptor strain on the left and the Swarmling strain on the right. The Raptor strain leaps over obstacles and onto targets from range. It can also jump up and down cliffs. The Swarmling, as the name suggests, allows the creation of more Zerglings, increasing the spawn rate of Zerglings from 2 to 3 and spawning them straight away. Zerglings also appear in World of Warcraft as pets and as mounts in Heroes of the Storm. Zerglings were evolved from the Dune Runner, which was a small and savage creature native to the desert world of Zagash. Queens used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the Queen are the fourth playable unit. In the second mission, you meet the first Queen. In leadership roles, Queens oversee hives and easily coordinate lesser strains. Queens generally can't communicate verbally, but have been observed to converse with other species psionically. A queen named Neadra was playable in Heart of the Swarm, where you started from a larva to a full-grown queen, capturing and killing a Protoss ship before taking over a planet while waiting for more orders from the Queen of Blades that never came. The creation of this breed of queen was carried out at the behest of the Queen of Blades, which was altered from an older breed of queen and ultimately from the Arachnes Broodkeeper. Banelings could have looked like these different concept art drawings. In StarCraft 2, the Banelings are the fifth playable unit. Banelings are created from Zerglings. Due to the additional size of the Baneling, the legs are thicker and their feet are replaced with sharp spikes. Banelings were first made on Serona during a Terran siege, where queens added native acidic mold to a Zergling, creating the first Banelings. Banelings in the Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Splitter strain on the left and the Hunter strain on the right. The Splitter strain was found on the planet Lelith. It will cause the Banelings to split in two on death, creating smaller versions of itself on death. The Hunter strain was found on the planet Scoria, which causes the Banelings to leap over obstacles and onto targets from range. It can also jump up and down cliffs, much like the Zergling Raptor strain. Aberrations could have looked like these different concept art drawings. In StarCraft 2, the Aberrations are the sixth playable unit. Aberrations are former Terrans who have undergone extreme mutation from the Zerg hyper-evolutionary virus. In the DLC Heat of the Swarm, Zagara, a Zerg queen, made it so the Aberrations could be spawned from larvae rather than just infections. Originally, the Aberration was meant to be a cross between the Banelings and infested Terran shown by the bubbles and boils on its back, however its combat role was changed. After the Zerg are finished, which faction would you want me to do next? Or would you prefer me to do special Zerg units first? In StarCraft 2, the Roaches are the seventh playable unit. Roaches are one of the more armored breeds of Zerg with high regeneration when burrowed. The Roach were originally designed as a melee unit, which animation can still be seen when Roaches are close to enemies. Roaches in the Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Corpseur strain on the left and the Vile strain on the right. The Corpseur strain has the ability to damage an enemy and if killed quickly will spawn two Roachlings. The Vile strain has the ability to slow down units using acidic saliva that acts as a constrictive agent. Roaches were evolved from the fast-healing Xantar slug from the tropical world of Garrix. Hydralisks used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the Hydralisks are the eighth playable unit. The Hydralisks are one of the Zerg's basic frontline creatures, forming the backbone of their onslaughts. Hydralisks in the heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Impaler strain on the left and the Lurker strain on the right. The Impaler strain will morph into an Impaler which is highly effective against armored units. The Lurker strain will morph into a Lurker which is highly effective against multiple light ground units. Hydralisks were evolved from the Slothine, which were peaceful herbivores. They were also called caterpillar cows. Due to the fierce nature of the Hydralisk, an annual Hydralisk Derby has also become an established event in Terran society, where Terrans hunt feral Hydralisks in the wastelands of Mars Era. That so far was my favorite video to edit. Caterpillar cows are great. Is there any funny lore in other games you want to share? Comment below. Mutalisks used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2 the Mutalisks are the 9th playable unit. Mutalisks form the main bulk of the flying forces of the Zerg. Mutalisks are amongst some of the most adaptable Zerg subspecies, being able to evolve into Guardians, Devourers, Broodlords and Vipers. Mutalisks in the heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Broodlord strain on the left and the Viper strain on the right. The Broodlord strain will besiege ground targets from range by creating broodlings. The Viper strain will pull units from one location and bring it below them where it will be stunned so that ground forces can annihilate it. Mutalisks can fly in space. They do this by excreting gas which is used as propulsion. They still flap their wings in space due to instinct. Mutalisks are evolved from the Mantis Screamer from the desolate Dinares sector. Lurkers used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2 Lurkers evolved from Hydralisks. Compared to other Zerg strains, Lurkers are arachnid in appearance. Lurkers serve as defense warriors for hive clusters and outlying Zerg colonies. Lurkers were first evolved from Tiamat brood Hydralisks. The Tiamat was specialized in tactical space combat and rarely fielded any ground creatures. The only weakness of the Lurker is that it is virtually defenseless while above ground. The Brutalisk first appeared in StarCraft 2 and looked like this. The Brutalisk is a variant strain of the Ultralisk which resembles a cross between a Zergling and a Hydralisk. While powerful, Brutalisk have a very slow movement rate. Fast-moving units easily dominate Brutalisk by utilizing hit-and-run tactics. During the End War, a number of Brutalisk were enslaved by Aemon and incorporated into his brood. The Brutalisk was designed initially as a unit for multiplayer in Wings of Liberty. During its development, the unit had gone through over 10 iterations before being finally removed. The multiplayer Brutalisk was much smaller than its campaign appearance. The Broodlord was originally morphed from the Corruptor. Broodlords are massive manta-like flying creatures that serve as the Swarm's aerial siege units. Broodlords are one of the latest additions to the Swarm, replacing the Guardian of previous conflicts. The glowing bulbs on the Broodlord's back are an evolution of the cancerous growths in the Corruptor's tentacles. The Broodlord has clusters of broodlings squirming under its carapace at any given time. Concepts were made for a Broodlord hero in Heroes of the Storm, named Broody the Broodlord, by the developers, who would be a full-flying hero, but the character was never released. In the heart of the Swarm campaign the Viper is an evolution of the Mutalisk. The Viper combines several vicious biological weapons to weaken enemy forces and give an edge to the Swarm. As one of the original Zerg broods, Vipers of the Leviathan brood exhibit more defiler tendencies than the rest of the Swarm. Vipers were originally a type of primal Zerg. Their uniquely vicious defenses drew the attention of Abathur, who brought their essence into the Zerg Swarm. Viper enslaved by the Cerberus program were given a hammerhead cranial implant that enhanced the accuracy of their proboscis. Ultralisks used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. Ultralisks are the most powerful ground strain the Swarm possesses. By the Brood War, prolonged exposure to Vespene gas had resulted in an enhancement to the Ultralisk's physical capabilities. During the Second Great War, some Ultralisks were combined with the essence of Xerxes' primal Zerg, making them truly unstoppable killing machines. Ultralisks evolved from the docile Brontolith, a creature that the Ultralisk now bears little resemblance to. This is how the Ultralisks have evolved during their discovery. Kerrigan can summon an Ultralisk in Heroes of the Storm. Generated by the Infestation Pit, the Swarm host burrows into the ground in order to provide a seemingly endless supply of locusts. The Swarm hosts of the Leviathan brood are uniquely specialized for amphibious assault and bear many genetic advantages that allow them to quickly move through the oceans and assail their prey. Swarm hosts in the heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Carrion strain on the left and the Creeper strain on the right. The Carrion strain will spawn flying locusts that attack ground units. The Creeper strain is able to travel quickly to any location on the map with creep. Progenitors of the Swarm hosts, named Primal hosts, were first encountered by the Swarm utilized by the Primal Zerg on Xeris, used against Kerrigan's forces by the pack leader Brack. This is what the Infestors looks like. Perhaps the Infestor's most dangerous feature is the Neural Parasite, a multi-mouthed symbiotic creature living within Infestors that, when spat, attaches to an enemy and controls its mind for a short period of time. Infestors are known to ingest infested marines to use as terror weapons on the battlefield, carrying them to a combat zone. Hardened plates of assimilated mold and fungus offer Infestors protection from enemy fire and would-be predators. The Neural Parasite embeds itself near the top of the spine of the victim, and the parasite's host can still communicate through the creature's native language to their former allies. Evolved from the Borbu matriarch and in use by the Zerg by 2503, Infestors are one of the more insidious new additions to the Swarm. This is what the Overseer looks like. Overseers are genetically altered overlords that have a mass of additional sockets filled with highly evolved optical receptors with hypersensitive retinas. Unlike most other Zerg breeds but like overlords, Overseers have the ability to act with appropriate judgment, but are severely limited in their mental flexibility. This latest evolution allows the Overseer to detect any hidden enemy units, including those that are burrowed underground or cloaked. Overseers are capable of hearing, processing and understanding Terran speech. The fins and tendrils of the Leviathan brood Overseers are bred to specialize in reconnaissance, allowing them to cut through both air and water with minimal effort. This is what the Ravager looks like. The Ravager is a Zerg artillery unit evolved from the Roach. The Ravager is not in the heart of the Swarm campaign. In use by 2505, the Ravager is the result of years of twisting and fine-tuning the genome of the Roach far beyond its biological limitations. Ravagers are effective against key units that are otherwise difficult for the Zerg to deal with, such as siege tanks, liberators, and deployed warp prisms. Occasionally the Ravager's exoskeleton would calcify, allowing for more durable armor. Abathur considered the resulting intimidation factor of such armor to be an added bonus. This is what the Corruptor looks like. A genetic marvel, Corruptors are giant brain-like creatures, with snapping beaks and dangling tentacles. Its core genus of the strain is unknown. Corruptors possess the ability to morph into brood lords. Once the swarm gains air, space superiority, its Corruptor fleet can morph and help turn the tide of the ground war. Designed solely for use against aerial targets, Corruptors are used against capital ships and are deeply feared by both Terrans and Protoss. Despite their essence seemingly having been lost from the swarm, Kerrigan used Corruptors in her attack on a Mobius core facility. Leviathan brood Corruptors adapted themselves to survive in high-gravity environments. This is what the Leviathans look like. Leviathans are the Zerg's equivalent of a capital ship. They are classified as Class 10 Zerg flyer and are the largest in Terran records. Leviathans are typically armed with a daunting array of bioweapons. Giant, hollow tentacles resembling those of the spine crawler can grab smaller craft or puncture the hulls of larger ships and insert Zerg boarding parties. Leviathans were once spaceborne creatures before being infested by the Zerg, turning them into armored carriers. They can operate in temperature conditions of near absolute zero and are capable of traveling through warp space. Marines used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the Marines are the first playable unit. Marines compose the bulk of most Terran frontline forces, ranging from officially government-sanctioned units, local militias, and private security firms, to pirates, renegades and mercenaries. Koprolu sector Marines are generally equipped with powered armor suits and rapid-fire C-14 rifles. Marines can shoot both ground and air targets. There are multiple factions that use Marines, such as the Terran Confederacy, Terran Dominion, United Earth Directorate, Kel Morian Combine, Emojan Protectorate, the Sons of Koral, Rayna's Raiders, the Knights of Tyrador, the Warpigs, the Mobius Foundation, Myra's Marauders, and the Mar Sera Separatists. However, mercenary Marines will often carry bladed rifles, largely for intimidation. SCV used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the SCVs are the second playable unit. The T-280 SCV is a reliable vehicle used to construct and maintain everything from remote outposts to space platforms as well as harvest resources. They are used by both military and civilian interests throughout the Koprolu sector for their versatility and reliability, and are regarded as a foundational unit for Terran forces. The scent of rig grease from SCVs can be used by the Zerg to track them. Older SCVs had reinforced plating until the manufacturer decided to cut back on unnecessary expenses. This decision proved very unpopular among SCV pilots, and even spurred riots, which were quelled fatally by security forces. Medics used to look like this in StarCraft 1, but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the medics are the third playable unit. Clad in light infantry armor similar to the CMC series, medics carry arm-mounted compartmented shields, stocked with trauma gear, including nano-conveyed anesthetics, chemical modifiers, and attenuated lasers for on-site surgery. The United Earth Directorate pacification fleet included combat medics in its front lines. Recruitment for medics drew in mostly women. Live field studies have indicated that medics using medpacks heal troops 25% faster, a difference that can turn the tide in a fierce encounter. However, casualties will still occur, and for dying Marines, medics administer a drug known as the Final Protocol. Firebats used to look like this in StarCraft 1, but now look like this. In StarCraft 2, the Firebats are the fourth playable unit. Firebats are armored assault troopers, often attached to provide support for Marine squads. Firebats are almost exclusively composed of resocialized criminals and psychotic pyromaniacs. During the Guild Wars, the experimental CMC 230XF power armor was equipped with jetpacks and issued to flamethrower infantry troopers, and was given the nickname Firebat. At some point after the Battle of Adena, Firebats utilized a leaner, more streamlined powered armor. This is what the Hellion looks like. In StarCraft 2, the Hellion is the fifth playable unit. The Hellion is a high-speed raider built around a lightweight four-wheel chassis and is regarded as a support unit. Hellions were given the ability to transform into bipedal walkers named Hellbats. Due to this upgrade, it became a necessity to replace the plating in older Hellion models. In use by 2490, the Hellion was originally developed as an armored combat vehicle, but was deemed too cumbersome to be effective in its intended scout role. The Dominion armed forces used the Hellion as their primary scouting vehicle, supplanting the role once held by the Vulture. Hellions made their way into the motor pool of the Emojan Protectorate. Their Hellions sport improved suspension, defensive plating, and more comfortable seats for the drivers. This is what the Marauder looks like. In StarCraft 2, the Marauder is the sixth playable unit. The Marauder is a Terran infantry unit in StarCraft 2. It replaced the Firebat in multiplayer during development. The troops manning the suits are quite different to their Firebat counterparts. As of 2504, 47% have never been to jail, and only 23% have ever been accused of murder. The Marauder can only attack ground targets. Its attack is more powerful against armored units. It may slow units, except for massive units. The Dominion Special Forces surveyed Marauders on how to improve their hardware, and the resounding answer was to increase the size of their guns. The Emojan Protectorate also has access to Marauders, which are equipped with more advanced suits than their counterparts. This is what the Reaper looks like. In StarCraft II, the Reaper is the 7th playable unit. Operating in squads, Reapers specialize in hit and run, close quarters combat. Dominion Reapers consisted of individuals that are resistant to neural resocialization, pirates, petty crooks, murderers, the occasional political dissident. Crashes and fatalities were common among new recruits, as the unwieldy booster proved difficult to control. Reapers were obligated to serve 2 years before being discharged. In the first 5 years, the Reaper Corps failed to have a single recruit complete more than 6 months of service. Myra's Marauders make use of a particularly large number of Reapers, who modify their armor with scrap metals, and are particularly famous for their armor's distinctive metal mohawks. This is what the Vikings looks like. In StarCraft II, the Vikings are the 8th playable unit. The A2 Viking Armored Mechanical Hybrid is a Terran unit with the ability to transform between a ground unit, assault mode, and an air unit, fighter mode. A ship used to support other Terran forces, the Vikings' transformation ability was based heavily on that of the siege tank. In its aerial mode, Vikings are classified as air superiority fighters. The Viking was designed to be the ultimate anti-air and ground support weapon system, armed with a large payload of MT-50 Lanza torpedoes and twin Gatling cannons for both respective tasks. The Viking was based on Worm designed by the Terran Confederacy. However, the Worm was considered to be sluggish and unresponsive, and thus was a rare sight. During the reign of Emperor Valerian Mensk, a new Viking was commissioned by Castillo Industries, which made a Viking with a sleeker design and that was more cost-efficient to construct. This is what the Diamondback looks like. In StarCraft II, the Diamondbacks are the 9th playable unit. The first Diamondback prototypes were produced by the Terran Confederacy during the Great War, but never developed beyond that stage. The Diamondback's ability to fire on the move, and its high speed, made it well suited for catching the trains. Diamondbacks were also used by Myra's Marauders. The Dominion also acquired Diamondbacks. Early in the development of StarCraft II, the Diamondback was known as the Cobra. It was in the game engine as early as 2006 and was armed with twin Eviscerator cannons which dealt very heavy damage against armored targets. Goliaths used to look like this in StarCraft I but now look like this. In StarCraft II, the Goliaths are the 10th playable unit. Goliaths are constructed out of a neo-steel frame. Their armor renders them quite resilient to fragmentation grenades and even small arms fire, though their cockpits are vulnerable to missiles. It is equally adept at providing both ground-level and anti-air support. Goliath armament consists of twin anti-armor 30mm smoothbore autocannons on the arms which fire explosive shells and Hellfire AA scatter missiles. Few units are as closely associated with Terran military might as the Goliath. The Walker was originally manufactured by Lars Corp Technologies for the Kel-Morian Combine, intended for an infantry support role, especially in urban environments. Goliaths appear as mercenary units on the Braxis Holdout and Warhead Junction maps in Heroes of the Storm. The Vulture used to look like this in StarCraft I but now look like this. In StarCraft II, the Vulture are the 11th playable unit. The Vulture class hoverbike, aka Vulture Hovercycle, is a Terran hoverbike used mainly for scouting. Despite its reputation as a death trap, it is still considered a classic piece of engineering by enthusiasts. The Vulture is designed with speed and reliability in mind. Its limited gravity hover technology allows the bike to travel over rough terrain with little loss of traction or speed, and reach speeds up to 230 miles per hour. Originally, the standard Vulture armament was an anti-personnel grenade launcher. Since the Brood War, however, Vultures may instead be equipped with a mounted laser cannon. The Vulture remained in use by the Dominion Armed Forces. Dominion Ghost Program trainees begin training in the use of Vultures in their second year. Their role was diminished when the Dominion turned to the Hellion to meet its military scouting needs. The siege tank used to look like this in StarCraft I but now looks like this. In StarCraft II, the siege tanks are the 12th playable unit. The siege tank is a Terran vehicle that can be configured to fulfill both the armored support and the long-range artillery support roles. There are many variations of the siege tank such as mercenary siege tanks, AAV-5 Arclight and Crucio. Mercenary groups are known for the modifications they make to their siege tanks, both to increase their functionality and make them more visually intimidating. Arclight armament consisted of twin 80mm PPG-7 plasma cannons when mobile and the 120mm shock cannon when in siege mode. Later on this was upgraded to the 120mm Mjolnir artillery cannon, which fired plasma shells in contrast to the standard explosives of the shock cannon. Such weapons were sometimes used for scorched earth operations. The Crucio features superior protection and armament compared to its predecessor. The Crucio was designed for increased survivability, with an enlarged, reinforced turret and hull. Yet, the true might of the Crucio lies in its siege mode. On activation, the twin plasma cannons become the dreaded 180mm shock cannon. The Ghosts used to look like this in StarCraft I but now looks like this. In StarCraft II, the Ghosts can be the 13th playable unit. Ghosts are feared Terran covert operatives. Originally created by the Terran Confederacy, the majority of Ghosts are currently trained by and operates primarily under the authority of the Terran Dominion. They are known for their assassination skills, psionic powers and ability to cloak. The official statement from the Terran Dominion government was that Ghosts and the Ghost program did not exist. Many Terrans dismissed Ghosts and the existence of psionically gifted Terrans in general as lies and propaganda. Ghosts were chosen from psychically gifted individuals who were quarantined by the Terran Confederacy, and later Terran Dominion, and trained from infancy to channel their psionic energies to augment their natural physical strength and endurance. Ghosts are trained in target shooting, close quarters combat, martial arts and possibly other techniques, and vehicular expertise. Ghosts have the ability to read minds but generally do not have the ability to block thoughts. Ghosts find each other very easy to read. During Sarah Kerrigan's training, she had a gun placed to her head by a guard and was ordered to kill the guard before he killed her. Kerrigan was subjected to this training at age 12. This is what the Spectres looks like. Spectres are Terran Special Forces operatives with psionic powers granted by the psionic reagent Terrazine. Many or all were elite Ghost agents which have been exposed to Terrazine. As a result of an alliance with the Emojan Protectorate and using their advanced technology, plus that stolen from Sector 9, Spectres are difficult to detect via detectors or mind reading, except by other Terrans exposed to Terrazine. Their hostile environment suits give a greater boost to strength and agility than the standard Dominion version, and they were given sonic dampening boots for quieter movements. The results of the Spectre procedure affects everyone slightly differently. Many become eccentric, collecting devices such as dolls in an effort to enhance their powers. In 2501, the Terran Dominion discovered the fringe world of Demon's Fair. Investigators discovered a Terrazine-releasing rift there, and upon realizing the gas-enhanced psionic power, Emperor Arcturus Mentz created a secret program, Project Shadowblade. This is what the medevac looks like. The medical evacuation dropship, officially designated as the G-226 medical transport and called the medevac for short, is a Terran aerospace transport that also provides medical support for wounded troops in the battlefield. The medevac is outfitted with a state-of-the-art medical bay, supposedly the most advanced in the Koprulu sector and triage station that uses auto sutures and laser scalpels to seal wounds and repair tissue almost as fast as it's mangled, though the accuracy and precision of these tools are questioned by Marines. Soldiers are administered growth stimulators, nanomachines, and pain suppressants to keep them in the field. The machines also bond with damaged tissue, exponentially boosting its natural regenerative properties. After a covert operation resulted in heavy casualties among the Dominion Special Forces, the Dominion authorized a greater use of medevac dropships for their specialists. The success of the medevac design caused the Emojan Protectorate and Kel Morian Combine to adopt them as well. The extensive medical training of Emojan medevac pilots has been credited for the longer than average soldier lifespan in the Protectorate. So this is what the Banshee looks like. The Banshee is powered by relatively low thrust and inexpensive VTOL turbofans capable of operating only in an atmosphere, coupled with a fantail rotor assembly for steering and banking. The Banshee was designed to be both economical and effective. Built specifically to provide air support for frontline infantry, they are ideal aircraft for tactical strikes. The Banshee is heavily optimized for its intended role. Its standard armament is air-to-ground backlash rockets. Additional armament options were also developed. Kel Morian Banshees were armed with rapid-firing projectile weaponry capable of striking aerial targets. The Banshee was designed by Procyon Industries to meet requirements from the Terran Dominion for a dedicated ground attack aircraft for counter-insurgency operations. Initial deployment within the Dominion was disappointing. The aircraft was judged as too inflexible, and many were relegated to minor roles with backwater militias. Through a series of backdoor deals, the Emojan Protectorate was able to acquire a limited number of Banshees from Procyon Industries, although the company maintained they were stolen. This is what the Wraith looked like in StarCraft 1. It now looks like this. The Wraith has been replaced by the Viking in the anti-air role, while the Banshee is far superior in the ground attack role and inherits the Wraith's cloaking ability. Wraiths primarily use missiles for their air-space attacks but can also use lasers for air-space targets. Against ground targets, however, their lasers lack punch. Known for their maneuverability, piloting a Wraith is no small task, however, and aspiring Colonial Fleet Wraith pilots already had to be certified combat pilots before gaining access to the new craft. Wraiths are capable of both atmospheric and deep spaceflight, can withstand entry through a planet's atmosphere and are capable of traveling at supersonic speeds. Wraiths remained in service by the Dominion after the Brood War. The Dominion placed restrictions on the augmentations allowed on privately owned Wraith fighters. By 2504, they could still be found as part of the Dominion Armed Forces, despite being older technology. The battle cruisers used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. Battle cruisers stem as far back as the early days of the Terran Confederacy. While there are many classes of battle cruisers, all are armed with lasers and protected by neosteel armor. Battle cruisers were employed during the Guild Wars when space engagements were fought by capital ships and medium-sized gunships. The development of anti-capital ship starfighters, such as Wraiths, did not spell the end of battlecruisers. Gravity accelerators are also found on all battlecruisers. Warp drives are also fixed on battlecruisers, allowing it to achieve FTL travel. The Leviathan class was uncommon at the start of the 26th century, having largely been supplanted by the Behemoth class. The Behemoth class was the most common type during the Great War, representing a noticeable improvement over the Leviathan. It can travel through warp space, operate within atmospheres and land on planetary surfaces. The Hercules class entered service after the Brood War. The Hercules could be equipped with plasma torpedoes for saturation ground bombardment. Like the Yamato cannon, the plasma torpedo system also had a large energy requirement. This is what the Thor looks like. The Thor is a huge and powerful Terran mechanical siege walker. Despite the Thor being smaller than the Odin, the Thor is still heavily armed and armored, and known to be one of the most heavy and powerful mechanical units in the Dominion armed forces. Named after the Norse god of thunder, the Thor is a class of siege walker. Those in service during the Second Great War were more maneuverable than the Odin incarnation. Pilots of Thors were referred to as controllers. The Thor is equipped with different types of heavy weapons, and has enough artillery to take down an entire enemy army by itself. It is armed with 4 Thor's hammer particle accelerators, 2 are fired from each arm. Originally, 4 250mm strike cannons resided on its back, but these have since been replaced by Punisher cannons. These fire 250mm anti-aircraft shells fitted with advanced electronics to minimize wasted shots. The Thor stemmed from the Terran Dominion Thor project, a program that resulted in the creation of the Odin. When the Thor made its public debut, military analysts were stunned, and embedded UNN reporters described it as a huge bipedal war machine armed with a dorsal artillery that wouldn't be out of place on a battleship. This is what the Mule looks like. The Mobile Utility Lunar Excavator, MULE, is an experimental Terran mining robot. The MULE is still in the prototype stage and has a limited battery life. The Dominion fleet deploys these machines via drop pod. Once deployed, a MULE will collect resources 3 times faster than an SCV. Because the powerhouse excavators had no brains or instinct, the very best CVs knew that to get the most efficient work out of mules, it was best to work in concert with them. When mules ran out of power, 2 SCVs could provide more to them to get them started once again. Mules appear in Heroes of the Storm as a talent upgrade for support and specialist heroes, and can be called down to repair structures. This is what the Odin looks like. The Odin was a Terran Dominion heavy combat walker. It was the prototype for the smaller Thor. Project Odin was the most significant Terran Dominion military development since the Brood War. It was developed at the Simonson Munitions Factory on Coral under a complete security lockdown. The workers were effectively all under arrest to prevent any leak of information. Imogen agent Pandora infiltrated the facility as part of a group of visiting officials and discovered the Odin undergoing testing. The intrusion was discovered, but Pandora escaped to warn the Protectorate. The Protectorate planted information implicating the Koprulu Liberation Front. The Odin's official unveiling occurred during the Second Great War, but was co-opted by Rayna's raiders to expose Arcturus Mensk's war crimes. Prior to the ceremony, the raiders stole the walker and used it to destroy Valhalla. The raiders abandoned the walker and it was recovered by the Dominion. The Odin was later deployed to defend the Coral Palace in August Grad during the swarm invasion of Coral and was subsequently destroyed. The palace fell and Emperor Mensk was killed. This is what the Predator looks like. Predators, sometimes called cybercats, are big, heavy robots shaped like cats. In 2502, some were owned by the Screaming Skulls, and were used in an attempt to kill their former captives. During the Second Great War, Egon Stepman's research was, theoretically, able to equip Predators with an electrical discharge field. Predators were used in service of the Terran Dominion, and were deployed in the defense of Skygear platform against the Zerg swarm. After the End War, several Predators were spotted in a Defenders of Man facility in Sharpsburg. Predator A130, known as the Cyberwolf, this variant of the Predator is due for deployment in 2506, expected to replace the first generation of Predators. The Dominion takes no responsibility for injuries occurred while trying to ride them. This is what the Hercules looks like. The Hercules-class dropship is a Rayna's Raiders variant of the Hercules-class commercial cargo transport. The reinforced superstructure is based on Egon Stepman's research of Zerg biology. The Hercules has a large capacity and fast unloading speed. The dropship is equipped with survival pods. Emergency egress to the ground by pod typically causes injuries. By 2505, Hercules-class dropships were in use by the Terran Dominion. By 2506, they were used by Mobius Corps as well. The Hercules may be used to transport Thors, and can carry 3 of them at a time, since each Thor takes up 8 slots when transported. This leaves 6 slots to spare. It has 30 passenger slots, allowing it to carry nearly 4 times the number of passengers as normal transports can, and deploys all of its units simultaneously. This is what the Raven looks like. The Raven is a Terran air unit featured in StarCraft 2. It is based on defensive spellcasting support via debuffing threats and constructing objects. The Raven is controlled remotely by a Terran pilot, while the craft's computer houses the main AI core that regulates all critical ship systems and subsystems. A few military consultants, speaking on condition of anonymity, have expressed concerns that such a powerful AI could gain sentience, leading to abject disaster. Functionally, the Raven is a robust all-around air mobile vehicle and workhorse that combines the functions of a surveillance drone and a combat engineer. Ravens excel in protection and reconnaissance due to the defensive auto turrets and their advanced senses, which can detect cloaked and burrowed enemies, and unmask Protoss hallucinations. The Terran Dominion initially designed the Raven to give low-level protection to its most isolated outposts, but recently the Raven has been used in escalating levels of conflict to replace the older and costlier science vessel. This is what the Liberator looks like. The Liberator was developed to ensure Terran air superiority on the battlefield and was based on the designs of the United Earth Directorate Valkyrie. An aerial counterpart to the siege tank, the Liberator is a versatile medium-sized gunship, armed with twin missile launchers to strike at clusters of aerial threats and can also deploy an anti-ground cannon after transforming into a stationary air platform. The Dominion Special Forces used advanced neosteel research to improve their Liberators, giving them a more complex plating system that augmented their transformation process. Liberators were utilized by planetary militias such as the Knights of Tirador, who equipped the craft with numerous forward-facing floodlights to increase visibility of the Tirador IX's wilderness. Similarly, the Imogen Protectorate was able to develop its own version of the Liberator only a few years after it was first deployed. Its wholly reimagined rear thrusters became the envy of the Dominion engineering team behind the original design. The Gorgon is a class of advanced Terran battlecruiser. During the reign of Emperor Valerian Mensk, the Gorgons were considered to be key to the Dominion fleet, so much so that it was thought Valerian could not effectively rule without them. The Gorgon was in production by 2503, and at least one, the Bucephalus, was designed to be a large and impressive flagship. They came equipped with J-23 missile launchers, crew-served batteries, point defense systems across the hull and a crew complement of 6,000 to 8,000. During the Second Great War, General Horace Warfield defended the Dauntless Plateau by deploying Gorgons in the Bone Trench. He could only deploy one at a time, but it was enough to defeat the local Zerg forces led by Broodmother Zagara. The Cyclone is armed with twin Typhoon missile pods that engage air and ground threats. The Cyclone also features a sophisticated lock-on system, which allows it to concentrate fire on an enemy while on the move. Cyclones are outfitted with all-terrain treads, clutchless transmission and an advanced target acquisition array. To keep personnel out of harm's way, the Terran Dominion developed the Cyclone, a mobile assault drone. Originally designed as a robotic vehicle, the Cyclone evolved over several iterations to become a Terran-piloted vehicle, due to the creativity of humans, or, as some would call it, insanity, that AIs cannot match, though some variants piloted by an AI remained in use by the Kel-Morian Combine. Science vessels used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. The science vessel is a type of Terran starship used for general exploration and scientific research purposes. Terrans built Explorer-class science vessels to conduct a wide range of research and development projects, stationed at points throughout the Koprulu sector and beyond to study anomalous phenomena and early on, search for alien life. The Confederacy's Epsilon Squadron used science vessels extensively for border surveillance and study. During the Second Great War, Rayna's raiders were able to develop a new class of science vessel. This model can carry out hull repairs through nanotechnology and retains the irradiation function from its predecessor. The Kurzweil-class science vessel is an experimental craft, designed by Valerian Mensk, and in service by 2505. The Warhound is a close-in Terran walker, designed from the SCV chassis. Initially an impromptu design to defend fringe colonies from bandits, the Warhound would be adopted by the Terran Dominion, primarily for use against rebel Terran elements. The Warhound is designed for close anti-vehicle and anti-armor work, with some anti-air capability. Missile racks are mounted on the Warhound's shoulders, and cannon barrels are located on the end of its arms. The missile racks are capable of firing either anti-air Cyclone missiles or Haywire missiles, functioning as an anti-armor weapon. The concept of the Warhound began with Yakov Ilyev, an engineer working on a backwater planet. The mine he was working on was experiencing trouble with local bandits, and to deal with the issue, he outfitted an SCV with different armaments. Probes used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. The probe is the basic Protoss construction unit. Probes are robotic drones that stand at the forefront of Protoss colonization and military efforts. Self-sufficient probes are functional, light, and easy to produce. The probe truly shines in its service to Protoss military might, providing service to the nexus of any Protoss base. They are also used to warp in structures, manufacturing and planting micro-beacons, allowing fully functional buildings to be warped in over interstellar distances. Typically, probes are not programmed with personality aspects such as bravery or curiosity. Purifiers utilize probes to gather resources, and their connection to purified data web makes them models of efficiency and diligence. Probes date back to the Protoss's second age. They were originally designed by the Kali caste to lay the foundation for Protoss colonies on hostile worlds where living workers would be at too great a risk. Zealots used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. Zealots are lower-ranked Templar who have yet to reach the upper levels of the Kala. They form the backbone of the Protoss military, and have been utilized since before the Discord. The Tal'Darim also employ Zealots. As the lowest-ranking links in the chain of ascension, they are the ones most eager to prove themselves. Each Zealot is trained for decades in hand-to-hand combat, tactics, pain tolerance and martial discipline. Zealots are taught to hate their enemies with a white-hot passion and to hunt them down without mercy, even in the face of their own deaths. The shame of the fall of Ior drove the Zealots to intensify physical training. This includes duels at the end of their training, which appears to have the potential to be shortened. A severely injured Zealot may be transported off the battlefield upon the moment of defeat using a device named a warp stone in order to be recovered. Those too critically injured are often transformed into a Dragoon or an Immortal. The Stalker is a Nerazim cybernetic war machine. The Dark Templar developed the Stalker, a war machine inspired by the Kali Dragoon. While Dragoons were piloted by crippled Protoss warriors, the Stalker is controlled by the shadow essence of a Dark Templar warrior fused into a metal body. Some voluntarily chose to become Stalkers in order to better hunt and kill their foes because they only wish to sharpen their combat skills and serve their High Lord, as not all Tal'Darim seek ascension. Stalkers stand roughly twice as tall as a Terran wearing CMC armor. They draw their psionic power from their host Nerazim's connection to the void. They are armed with carapace-mounted particle disruptors adept against both ground and aerial targets. These weapons draw upon the power of the Dark Templars' training and technology to fire lethal blasts of entropic void energy. Stalkers have been credited with many fantastic powers since their battlefield debut. However, only one is witnessed consistently, an ability to instantly teleport, or blink, from one spot to another. The Centurion is a type of Nerazim warrior. They are a zealot variant available in the campaign of Legacy of the Void. Centurions serve as the backbone of the Nerazim Shadow Guard, and joined the Golden Armada for their campaign to retake Ior. The Shadow Guard are divided into legions, with exactly 100 Centurions assigned to each legion. Their key difference over the Ior Zealot and Sentinel is their abilities, Shadow Charge and Dark Coil. Shadow Charge allows them to phase through enemies when charging, while Dark Coil stuns enemies around them when they attack. They also benefit from being able to phase through other units to reach their targets, allowing them to quickly engage enemies even if initially caught up in a crowd. Lore-wise, Warp Blades are more powerful than Psi Blades. However, despite possessing Warp Blades, the Centurion deals the same amount of damage as the base Zealots, who has Psi Blades. Dragoons used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. The Dragoon is a type of Protoss quadrupedal assault walker. Following the Brood War, they were succeeded by the Immortal and to a lesser extent, the Stalker. Dragoons are about as tall as a Terran wearing CMC armor. The Dragoon's phase disruptor fires antimatter bolts sheathed in psychically charged fields. A similar weapon is used by the photon cannon. Dragoon pilots were generally grievously wounded veteran Templars retrieved from the battlefield. Some of the most revered Protoss warriors have been placed in Dragoons, and Dragoon pilots were renowned for their intelligence in battle. Dragoons were created sometime after the life of Arden by Furanax tribe smiths, and were created as a way to ensure that fallen Protoss warriors could continue fighting after suffering grievous injuries. On occasion, able Templar would become pilots. The pilots were honored in Protoss society but their status sometimes marked them as outsiders. Some pilots found it difficult to control their shells. This is what the Dark Templar looks like. Dark Templars are the Nertsum version of the Avenger and Bloodhunter. Dark Templar are effective against worker lines. Their high base damage kills workers in single hits, with damage upgrades outpacing worker armor upgrades. Warp Blades are more powerful than Psi Blades, and react to the user's strength of will, turning centuries of discipline and training into a powerful weapon. Further iterations on its design yielded scythe-like blades, which helped diversify the combat style of the Dark Templar. The Avenger is a Dark Templar variant available in the single-player campaign of StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void. The Avenger is the Kali variant of the Dark Templar, alongside the Nerazim Dark Templar and the Taldaram Bloodhunter. Outraged at the fall of Ior to the Zerg, some of the Kali adopted the ways of the Nerazim and returned to Ior to wage a secret guerrilla war. Due to their small numbers, they employed warp technology to save themselves from death on the battlefield so they could fight another day. The Dalam led by Artanis later made contact with them again and brought them back into the fold as cloaked warriors. The Immortal is a Protoss cybernetic war machine. Immortals stem from Dragoons. Their pilots live in a sterile nutrient solution saturated with microscopic machines, which helps preserve their mangled bodies. Immortals stand over twice as tall as a Terran wearing CMC armor. They are outfitted with two twin-phase disruptors as their primary attack form. They give critical fire support to legions of zealots. Immortals are equipped with armor weave that mitigates impacts through energy dissipation. Additionally, the hardened shields used by Immortals are created by intertwining spectrums and wavelengths of varying intensity. Following the Brood War, crippled Templar were transplanted into the new Immortal exoskeletons instead of Dragoons. Ultimately, Immortals are a dying breed. Soon, none will remain. By 2506, only the most revered heroes of the Templar were allowed to become Immortals, due to the resources required to produce them. The Annihilator is a Protoss cybernetic war machine. The Annihilator has the same anti-armor attack as the normal Immortal, but instead of the Immortal's barrier, the Annihilator is armed with a shadow cannon that can attack ground or air units. When the player later acquires the Taldaram Vanguard, the Vanguard outclasses the Annihilator as a dedicated anti-armor unit due to its splash damage and stronger attack. The Nerazim believe that their connection to the Void strengthens near death. To this end they have employed Immortal technology on some of their warriors to hold them in such a state of near death indefinitely, greatly boosting their powers. The Annihilator is also able to use Shadow Cannon on air units, helping to alleviate its vulnerability to airborne foes. Sentries are used to support Zealots in light of the Protoss race's diminishing population. Sentries are Protoss combat drones. Sentries employ a disruption beam to attack their enemies, and offer protection through Guardian shields. Sentries can also project force field barriers to stall or split up opposing forces. This is done by turning bursts of energy into a small, impenetrable barrier to hinder, block, or funnel the advance of enemy troops. They also have the ability to create hallucinatory images through an inbuilt holo projector. These holograms can draw enemy fire while a real Protoss strike force maneuvers into position to deliver the killing blow. By 2506, some sentries were outfitted with portable shield batteries to better sustain the lives of Protoss warriors in battle. While creatures or machines of prodigious size can shatter the cohesion of these translucent force fields, ordinary soldiers and vehicles become fodder to Protoss ranged weapons. The Energizer is Purifier, a variant of the Sentry available in the co-op missions and in the single-player campaign of StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void. Equipped with onboard chrono boosters, the Energizer is designed to enhance the speed of Purifier shock troops. Energizers are capable of generating a temporary power field, enabling access to the psionic matrix and warp network where pylons are not available. The Energizer's primary supportive ability is Chronobeam, which increases the attack and movement speed of an allied unit by 50%. The low energy cost of Chronobeam and its fairly quick casting time allows a comparatively small number of Energizers to support a large army, and a 50% boost to attack rate can really multiply the effectiveness of your units. The Energizer is not able to move or attack while in phasing mode, but can still use Chrono Beam. The Sentinel is one of 3 melee warrior variants that the player can choose from in Legacy of the Void, along with the Ior Zealot and the Nerazim Centurion. Sentinels are a type of purifier. Karax added him to the Dalam's army after retrieving data on the purifiers from Glacius. Unlike the traditional Zealots, Sentinels are fully robotic, making them more expendable. They are outfitted with a basic AI instead of a personality construct, and onboard systems to rapidly repair him to combat-ready status should the Sentinel be destroyed. Their bravery and nobility in battle match their Templar counterparts. Several variants of the Sentinel have been developed, including some designed to emulate the combat prowess of Nerazim Dark Templar warriors. Sentinels were also found with the bulk of the Purifiers on Cybros. After Artanis recruited the Purifiers would make use of Sentinel Zealots throughout the rest of their campaign. The Phoenix is a Protoss air-to-air unit in StarCraft 2, a deadly spacecraft designed for aerial harassment. The Phoenix is highly maneuverable, possesses great speed, and is able to outmaneuver almost any foe. The Phoenix is rapidly replacing the older Scouts and Corsairs in the role of air superiority fighters for the Protoss. Phoenix patrols are a common sight on the outer rim of Protoss territory, where they sweep deep space for alien threats. The Phoenix is propelled by a compact inertial drive, which surrounds the craft in a warp field, allowing swift displacement in deep space or planetary atmospheres. The twin-ion blaster armament of a Phoenix is highly suited for air-to-air combat, and pack a punch against foes lacking armor. Its main armament, the blasters disintegrate their targets through short-wavelength energy beams composed of negatively charged ions that can only be used against aerial targets. Sophisticated and lethal as the Phoenix may be, all too often a patrol squadron will find itself heavily outnumbered by Zerg or Terran enemies. In the Reconstruction period after the End War, the Shellac tribe commissioned a number of Phoenixes modeled after Judicator-class escort ships. The Corsair is a Protoss anti-air fighter spacecraft. The Corsair is a fast and agile medium-sized warship, built by the Dark Templar. Corsairs are armed with twin neutron flares to attack ships, and are strictly anti-air weapons. The Nerazim constructed the Corsair to safeguard their nomadic fleets. Following the reunification of the Dark Templar with the Kali, it became a versatile component of the combined fleet. By the Second Great War, the Corsairs, along with the Scouts, were being replaced by Phoenixes in the main fleet. During the End War in 2506, the loss of the Golden Armada to Aemon convinced the Dalam to recommission the Corsairs for service. Adept is a Protoss infantry unit specializing in ranged assault. They use arm-mounted glaive cannons to tear apart lightly armored enemies in large groups. To thin out enemy forces, skilled adepts can perform a technique known as psionic transfer to create an energy duplicate. Despite their low rate of fire, adepts can punch a hole through lightly armored targets. In addition, they can project a shade of themselves, a controllable copy of the adept that is immune but which exists for a brief time. Adepts were originally intended by Hierarch Artanis to replace former Judicator caste leaders with Templar. By 2505, they were a recent addition to the Dalam's arsenal. The Blood Hunter is a Dark Templar variant available in the single-player campaign of StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void. The Blood Hunters are the assassins of the Tal'Darim. Due to their brutal and unforgiving society, any weakness in their numbers is despised. Tal'Darim deemed too weak to be of service by the High Lord are hunted down and slain by the Blood Hunters. Blood Hunters serve as the personal enforcers of the will of the High Lord, and meet secretly within their own dark shrines. The Blood Hunter is the Tal'Darim variant of the Dark Templar, alongside the Nerazim Dark Templar and the Kali Avenger. High Templars used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. High Templar are Protoss warriors that use powerful psionic powers to support other Protoss forces. They are veteran Templar who forego the rage and traditional forms of combat common to Zealots in order to better develop their psionic powers into potent tools and weapons. At one time, High Templar merged with another High Templar to form an Archon, thus sacrificing themselves to complete the warrior path and attain legendary status within the archives. A more subtle power is the ability for High Templar to create illusory duplicates of other objects. While these phantoms have no substance and cannot affect the material world, they are useful to confuse and divert the attention of the Protoss enemies in battle. In the days of the Golden Age of Expansion, attempts were made to train High Templars in the way of hand-to-hand psionic blade combat. However, at the advice of Grand Preserver Ahana, these attempts were halted, in favor of keeping the more traditional and focused split between the psi blade-wielding Zealots and the psionic power-wielding High Templar. Archaon used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. Archons can be formed by merging any combination of two High Templar and or Dark Templar. Against mass air units such as the Metallisks, the Archon remains one of the best counters alongside the High Templar's psionic storm. Archons are beings of psionic power and rage, and their presence on the battlefield inspires much fear in their foes. The creation of an Archon is a serious affair and is never made lightly, for it requires the reluctant sacrifice of valuable Templar for a short-term gain. The first Archons were created unexpectedly and their formation was soon legally sanctioned by Kala. High Templar who merged to form Archons are said to have reached the final stage of the warrior's path. Originally, Archons were formed through the merging of two High Templar. After the Brood War and the reunification of the Protoss, Archons of a different kind can now be created by merging two Dark Templar or even a Kali and Nerazim merging. The Vanguard is a Tal'Daram variant of the Immortal featured in the single-player campaign of StarCraft II, Legacy of the Void. The Vanguard are piloted by Tal'Daram warriors that fell in battle. Disgraced in defeat, they are placed in a vanguard for one more chance to make up for their failure. They revel in causing as much destruction as they can before dying in service to their High Lord. The Vanguard's normal attack is significantly different from the Immortal and the Nerazim Annihilator. The Vanguard's scatter cannons deal damage in several attacks, allowing them to do significantly higher damage. The Vanguard also deals splash damage in a small radius around the primary target. This makes them very powerful against large numbers of armored enemy units, and can give them the highest damage potential of the three Immortal variants. Dark Archons used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. The Dark Archon is a heavy Protoss psionic support unit. Like their High Templar brethren, two Dark Templar sacrifice themselves in a psionic melding, giving rise to the Dark Archon. The powers of Dark Archons extend well beyond those of the regular Archon. The burning, crimson figure of the Dark Archon spreads fear across any battlefield. These powerful creatures of living psionic energy embody the eternal wrath of the Dark Templar. During their long exile, the Dark Templar have faced many challenges. Struggling and adapting their arsenal of skills and converting their biology to suit their harsh environment ultimately resulted in the Dark Archon. The creation of Dark Archons was finally allowed after the Kali came to Shakuras, the Dark Templar homeworld. The Havoc is a variant of the Sentry available in the single-player campaign of StarCraft II, Legacy of the Void. The Tal'Daram stole a number of sentries from the Daylam and reprogrammed them violently, replacing their shield generators with onboard targeting systems. However, their force field generators remained intact. The Daylam came into usage of the Havocs during the End War. The Havoc lacks an innate attack like the Sentry and Energizer, being a purely supportive unit. It is able to use Force Field, and has the passive ability, Squad Sight, which boosts the range of units in a radius of 4 from the Havoc. Its third ability is Target Lock, which locks the Havoc on a single target, causing it to take 30% more damage from the player's units. Map editor files indicate the Havoc may have been called the Monitor earlier in development. Its Squad Sight and Target Lock abilities are tagged Observer in the editor files. The Colossus is a massive Protoss robotic walker. It is designed to destroy large numbers of weaker ground targets. The Colossus is an antiquated Protoss construct dating back to the Calith intercession. It is feared for being a war machine, and some Protoss believe they cannot be controlled and could turn against them. From a Terran standpoint, the Colossus is the ultimate terror weapon. Designed for pacification purposes, the Colossus is a towering construct, striding across the battlefield on 4 all-terrain tall, slender legs which give it an extremely high level of mobility. The Ahan Rii created Colossi made of stone components held together by void energies emanated from repurposed Xelanaga dynamos. The heavily armored hull of the Colossus carries 2 powerful thermal lances, one mounted on each side of its body. The lances themselves fire beams of superheated plasma that quickly incinerate scores of enemy ground targets, able to reduce a group of Marines to ashes in an instant. The Dominion advises Marines to find bunkers and call in air support when confronted by Colossi. Alternately, it has suggested that soldiers could try rushing the Colossus to get underneath its legs in order to evade its firing angles. Reavers used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. The Reaver is a Protoss mobile siege artillery unit. Reavers are heavy ground artillery, though are not artillery in the classic sense of Terran understanding, in that they don't lob unguided projectiles. Tube-like protrusions are located on the sides of the Reaver's head, giving the appearance of eyes. These are used to help the Reaver navigate. Reavers are limited in mobility, and are often shuttled by Protoss air units. The Reaver evolved from a civilian mobile manufacturing unit that was militarized to become a mobile artillery piece, ensuring that fewer lives would be lost when assaulting enemy bases. Somewhat fittingly, Reavers are renowned for leveling entire colonies in moments. Reavers fell into less use after the end of the Brood War, but remained part of the Daylam's arsenal in clearing out Zerg hive clusters. They were deployed by the corrupted Golden Armada against the Daylam defending the Xelanaga Keystone, but failed in their objective. The Mirage is a Purifier Phoenix variant available in the single-player campaign of StarCraft II, Legacy of the Void. The Mirage are Purifier vessels equipped with phasing technology that would be fatal should a biological pilot attempt to use it. This technology allows the Mirage to temporarily become incorporeal when engaging enemies, allowing them to briefly avoid enemy fire. The Mirage is the Purifier variant of the Phoenix, serving as the third starfighter option for the player with the Phoenix and the Corsair. The passive phasing armor ability greatly improves their longevity in battle by letting them avoid a substantial amount of enemy fire on them. This makes the Mirage best suited for prolonged frontline combat, and the most economical starfighter since it is harder to destroy. The Wrathwalker is a Colossus variant available in the single-player campaign of StarCraft II, Legacy of the Void. The Wrathwalkers are Colossi that were found and reactivated by Tal'Daram ascendants in search of superior firepower. They had their thermal lances replaced with charged pulse blasters, making them powerful against priority targets. During the End War, they became available to the Dalam Protoss after they disabled Cybros's stasis shields on Endian. They were used by the Tal'Daram Death Fleet to defend the Keystone on Ior. They also participated in the final assault against Aemon in the Void. During the Defenders of Man insurgency, multiple Wrathwalkers attacked the combined Defender, Dominion and Covert Ops forces defending Vardona. Instead of the Colossus's splash damage, the Wrathwalker deals heavy damage to single targets, making it better for fighting smaller numbers of powerful enemy units instead of swarms of smaller units. Carriers used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. The Carrier is a Protoss heavy air unit. Carriers are among the most powerful warships in the Protoss arsenal, and frequently take point in fleet maneuvers. Carriers made their way into the Tal'Daram arsenal after their engineers repurposed Kali designs, and make up the majority of the Death Fleet ships. Carriers have forward-mounted energy weapons used for purification, though standard carriers lack any armaments for use in standard ship combat beyond interceptors. Carriers are an ancient craft that were created in the Second Age of the Protoss Empire. After the End War, a small number of Kali carriers were redesigned using ancient methods to resemble carriers from the Second Age. These carriers were often used for diplomatic visits. The Protoss Tempest is a unit that was introduced in StarCraft 2, Heart of the Swarm. An immense capital ship, the Tempest was developed by the Protoss after the first phase of the Second Great War in order to maximize the effectiveness of their war machine against their enemies. The Tempest's large thrusters generate enough drive to displace the vessel's considerable mass, and are designed to take advantage of the immense power output of the ship's kinetic matrix. Upon first seeing the Tempest in combat, the Tal'Daram, in a rare case of being impressed by the Dalam, vowed to seize them for the Death Fleet. The cockpit of the Tempest is specially shielded, situated in a position where it overlooks the vessel's primary weapon. With this device, Tempest pilots build up volatile energies in the kinetic matrix that powers the Tempest. Tempests are often situated behind Protoss shock troops. The matrix's range is so large that it actually exceeds the radius of the Tempest's senses. Thus, Tempests sometimes need spotters to reveal faraway targets. The power coursing through the Tempest's hull is so monumental that its pilots must wear bulky dampening armor to withstand it. The Mothership is a powerful Protoss capital ship. Motherships are mighty Protoss support vessels, and are one of the most powerful warships in the Protoss arsenal. They served as the flagships of the Golden Armada. Motherships are costly and time-consuming to produce. As a result, the Protoss have begun constructing them in 2 stages, with the Mothership core being the first step. The core itself can be used as a defensive and support weapon. The Mothership's core has a similar barrier whose sole function is to keep the crew on the rest of the ship safe from the powerful energies it generates. Motherships greatly exceed the size of any Terran Dominion military vessel, though their size is still exceeded by the Zerg Leviathan. The Tal'Daram also use motherships. The Death Fleet's motherships are equipped for battlefield domination. Each one is a throne from which a Tal'Daram fleet lord oversees the ruin of their foes. The motherships were designed by Duras, and constructed during the Protoss Golden Age of expansion as deep space exploration vessels, leading armadas of Protoss ships through space. The Void Ray is a Protoss ship in StarCraft 2. In use by 2502, the Void Ray is a Dark Templar Protoss escort ship, the result of combining Nerazim and Kali technologies, and one of the first of its kind concerning joint Nerazim-Kali creations. The Void Ray is built around a prismatic core, an oblong crystal of synthetic origin that serves as a virtually eternal power source. The core derives its energy from both the Void and Kala, focusing them through phase crystals, and forming a self-sustaining reaction. The Void Ray's armored hull consists of plates fashioned from a flexible alloy, and are designed to handle the stress caused by the sheer power of the core. After the End War, a new generation of Void Rays combined the style of the ancient Templar during the Golden Age of expansion with the shadowy coloration of the Nerazim. The flux field projectors amplify the power of the core. These projectors channel streams of unstable energy into the phase crystal, increasing the effectiveness of the prismatic beam against heavily armored targets. The destroyers are Void Rays stolen by the Tal'Daram that underwent heavy modification. Instead of a prismatic core, their attacks are channeled by unstable bloodshard crystals. This creates an unstable beam that arcs between targets. An Ascendant is a high-ranking Tal'Daram on the chain of ascension, in contrast with a low-ranking Tal'Daram such as a Votary. They are a high Templar variant available in the campaign of Legacy of the Void. Ascendants climb the chain of ascension by killing, directly or otherwise, their superiors in Raxheer duels. Ascendants are only second to the High Lord in the chain. The lower an Ascendant's title, the higher their rank, e.g. First Ascendant is of higher rank than Second Ascendant. After years of absorbing Terrazine and having the advantage of using their Supplicant's essence, they become very powerful. Ascendants often dare one another to disable and commandeer an active Colossus. If one succeeds, the Tal'Daram gain a powerful war machine. If not, a rival Ascendant has been eliminated. The most cunning Ascendants utilize observers to spy on one another, in addition to the Tal'Daram's enemies. Arbiters used to look like this in StarCraft 1 but now look like this. The Arbiter is a Protoss warship specializing in providing psychic support. Lumbering but durable support vessels, Arbiters are piloted by members of the Judicator caste, and are infused with psionic energy. The Judicator uses the Arbiter as a base to provide support using spacetime manipulation. The Judicator can generate a large reality warping field that serves to conceal nearby friendly units. The Arbiter had to remain firmly anchored in spacetime to generate the field and so is not concealed itself. Arbiters are capable of transporting forces within their holds, including dragoons, as well as provide shields to allied forces. Prior to the Great War, Arbiters were crewed exclusively by Judicators, unlike other warships that were manned predominantly by Templar. The Arbiter often accompanied Protoss warfleets into battle. During the End War, Talander utilized a Purifier variant of the Arbiter named the Cybros Arbiter as one of the suits that could house his AI consciousness. This Arbiter overcame the need to be anchored in space-time and was able to cloak itself as well as allies.